Welcome to The Explainer. So, you know that really uncomfortable sinking feeling in your stomach? The one where you feel like you are somehow just falling terribly behind everyone else in life? Yeah, you're absolutely not alone. It's a painful, almost universally human experience. But today, we're not just going to sit around and talk about that feeling. We're actually going to look at the exact science behind why it happens, and more importantly, how you can actually stop it.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever wake up, reach over to check your phone while your eyes are barely even open, and honestly, within about 60 seconds, you just feel completely inadequate? Maybe it's about your career, your body, or your relationship status. Before you've even had your first sip of coffee, it feels like you've already lost the day because you just aren't measuring up. Why on earth does this happen?
Think about your everyday reality for a second. You're crammed on a crowded train, or maybe you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic on your morning commute, and what are you doing? You're scrolling. Bam, suddenly, you see a former coworker's glowing LinkedIn promotion. Or, you're watching some travel influencer perfectly posed on a white sand beach in Bali. In that single fleeting moment, your totally normal, mundane reality violently clashes with someone else's absolute peak success. It makes you feel instantly small. But as we're about to see, this is not some kind of modern personal failing.
So where does this all come from? Well, it turns out we're actually hardwired for it. It's a deeply ingrained evolutionary drive.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because the crucial takeaway here is that we really need to stop beating ourselves up for feeling this way. This isn't a sign that you lack self-esteem. Actually, scratch that. It's a hardwired evolutionary survival trait. Back in 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger coined something called social comparison theory. He discovered that humans have this fundamental, totally undeniable drive to evaluate themselves by looking at others. We are built as a social species. Historically speaking, if you didn't know where you stood in the pack, your actual survival was at risk. You had to constantly measure yourself against the tribe just to ensure you were safe. It's literally ancient evolutionary programming running in your modern brain.
Now, Festinger noticed that this comparison basically happens in two main directions. First, we've got upward comparison. That's looking at people who are, better off than us. This can be super motivating and push us to achieve more. But it can also completely devastate our self-esteem. On the flip side, we have downward comparison, looking at folks who are worse off. That instantly boosts our confidence and makes us feel secure. But if we rely on it too much, it breeds total complacency.
But here's the catch. What happens when you take that ancient wiring and drop it right into the 21st century? Technology acts as a massive multiplier.
Modern tech has essentially weaponized this natural human trait, and it's created an inherently unfair comparison. Think about it. When you're scrolling, you are comparing your everyday, messy, behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's highly curated highlight reel. You are comparing your Tuesday morning struggles to their absolute best, most heavily filtered once-a-year moments. Psychologically speaking, you are bringing a knife to a gunfight.
And this creates what we call the comparison trap loop. Let's walk through this step by step because it's wild. First, you open an app and compare. Second, you inevitably feel inadequate. Third, to soothe that emotional pain, you seek validation. Maybe you post something yourself, just hoping for some likes. And fourth, you start comparing your engagement to theirs. It is this dopamine-driven, completely unwinnable cycle of constant dissatisfaction, and our brains get literally trapped inside it.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really powerful concept called hedonic adaptation. This is a psychological mechanism where we very quickly adapt to improvements in our own lives. Say you get a raise at work. It feels absolutely amazing for about a week, right? And then it just becomes your new normal. But we continue to see others' improvements as super exciting and novel. So your own raise feels ordinary, but seeing a friend buy a brand new car still triggers intense FOMO, fear of missing out. This skewed perception directly drives our life choices, pushing us to chase things we don't even really want just because someone else has them.
Honestly, this FOMO exposes the absolute absurdity of our comparison habits. Just look at these two lives for a second. A 25-year-old startup entrepreneur grinding 80 hours a week, and a 25-year-old new parent focusing entirely on their family. These are completely different life journeys. They have totally different goals, totally different values. Yet our brains unfairly try to judge them on the exact same scale. We look at the entrepreneur's money and the parent's deep family connection, and somehow we expect ourselves to have 100% of both, simultaneously. It's crazy.
Which leads us perfectly into relative deprivation theory. This explains why feeling poor actually has very little to do with your absolute wealth and pretty much everything to do with feeling poorer than your specific reference group. It's exactly why high earners making six figures in expensive cities still genuinely feel completely broke. This idea actually goes all the way back to a 1913 comic strip called Keeping Up with the Joneses. Modern studies even show that people will rate their own salary as significantly less satisfying the very second they find out a colleague earns just a little bit more. Your actual wealth didn't change at all, but your reference point did.
To really hammer this home, let's look at one of my absolute favorite real-world examples. It's called the Olympic medal paradox.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this counterintuitive example perfectly proves that our chosen reference point totally dictates our happiness. When researchers study athletes' facial expressions on the podium, they reveal something incredible. Bronze medalists are demonstrably happier than silver medalists. No way, right? But think about it. The bronze medalist engages in downward comparison. They're comparing themselves to the person who came in fourth and got absolutely nothing, so they are thrilled just to be on the podium. The silver medalist, however, engages in upward comparison. They are looking right at the gold medalist, agonizing over that one split-second mistake that cost them the ultimate prize. It's the exact same event, incredible achievements for both, but totally opposite emotional states, purely based on who they compared themselves to.
All right, so we understand the evolutionary trap, and we know how technology makes it worse. The big question is, how do we actually escape it? Let's get into some evidence-based strategies. The very first strategy is a mental reframe. We really need to learn the difference between envy and admiration. Envy is painful, it's corrosive and bitter, mainly because you're viewing another person's success as a direct threat to your own self-worth. Admiration, on the other hand, is energizing. It simply comes down to choosing to view someone's success not as a threat, but as proof of what is actually possible. It becomes an inspiration. Same exact success, entirely different biological response in your own body.
Next up, let's look at the numbers. In a really famous Instagram experiment, researchers found that you don't actually need to, throw your phone into the ocean to feel better. Reducing your social media consumption by just 10 measly minutes a day measurably reduces feelings of loneliness and depression. Just 10 minutes! That's all it takes to give your evolutionary brain a desperately needed break from comparing itself to the entire globe.
So here is your actual real-world playbook to break the cycle. Let's run through it. First, conduct a social media audit right now. Unfollow any accounts that consistently make you feel inadequate. Just get rid of them. Second, actively practice gratitude for what you actually possess. This fights off that hedonic adaptation we talked about earlier. Third, use deliberate downward comparison occasionally just to remind yourself of how far you've actually come. But the absolute most critical strategy on this list, hands down, it's setting personal benchmarks. The only truly fair comparison in life is comparing yourself today to who you were yesterday. Your past self is literally the only person who had your exact starting line.
I really want you to carry this thought with you. Understanding your own psychology is the very first step to actually changing it. When you feel that morning inadequacy creeping in, just validating it and recognizing it is a game changer. Just saying to yourself, okay, that's just my 1954 evolutionary pack mentality acting up against some influencer's curated highlight reel. Doing that instantly strips the feeling of its power over you. So as we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question. When you wake up tomorrow morning and you instinctively reach for your phone, who will you compare yourself to? Will it be some unfair, curated ghost on a screen, or will it be the person you were yesterday? If you found this explainer helpful, please hit that subscribe button. Every single week, we take complex data and research about the human mind and break it down into these plain language slides just to help you understand yourself a little bit better. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.